All right, here we are. Jeremy, you want to get us started?
I'm Jeremy Scahill from Dropsite News, dropsitenews.com. This is a live show that we just started doing, Dropsite Newsroom. And today we're going to be discussing the war in Gaza, the latest on Donald Trump's meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu in the White House in the Oval Office yesterday. They discussed Iran, they discussed Gaza, they discussed Yemen and other issues. Later in the program, we're going to also be talking about Trump's tariffs with our colleague Jessica Burbank. Ryan, Jessica, good morning.
Good morning, Jeremy.
How you doing, Jeremy?
All right, so we had this meeting yesterday. I mean, Netanyahu, it's being painted in the Israeli press as Benjamin Netanyahu sort of getting a bit humiliated because ostensibly the purpose of the visit had to do with trying to get Trump to roll back the tariffs that he imposed on Israel. And in fact, Netanyahu had tried to preempt that the day before that big announcement went forward. But much of the focus was on comments that Trump made about Iran. And Trump indicated that he didn't want to go down what he called the obvious solution path, which would be a large-scale attack on Iran. And he went out and said that that the U.S. was going to be engaging in direct talks with Iran, said there's a big meeting that's going to be happening in Oman. The Iranians responded to that by saying that they aren't engaged in direct talks with the United States, that they're engaged in indirect talks. I mean, this could be that Trump doesn't necessarily, put a fine point on the differences between the two of them. But the Iranians this morning have basically been saying that, Trump was the one that invalidated a deal that was the product of Iran directly negotiating with the United States. And that for now, the Iranian position is that there's going to be indirect negotiations. You had sitting on the couch also with Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who also made some very belligerent comments about Yemen and said that the U.S. strikes that they claim are targeting the leadership of Ansar Allah, also known as the Houthi movement, were going to be intensifying in recent days. In a moment, we're going to be joined by our colleague from Gaza, Abubaker Abed, with a report on what's happening on the ground. But Ryan, first, let's just start off with your reaction to everything that went down in the Oval Office yesterday. There was supposed to be a full-blown press conference with Netanyahu and Trump. The White House canceled that soon before the meeting began. But just share some of your broad stroke thoughts about that situation.
The clash with Biden's bear hug approach was pretty evident. Biden had this theory that for some reason the superpower had to suck up to the client state, and by sucking up to the client state would be more pliant. It never made any sense, and it didn't work out in practice. Netanyahu seems to have gotten zero of the many things that he came to Washington looking for. On top of the things that you mentioned, I think he was hoping to get a little bit more rhetorical support for what he calls the quote unquote Trump plan, which is the complete ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the construction of a Riviera or whatever he was, Trump Riviera or whatever he was calling it in Gaza. And Trump kind of, dismissed his own idea. He said that was an idea. Nobody seemed to buy into it. So I guess we're moving on from that. And then Trump also seemed to chastise Netanyahu for his attacks on Turkish positions in Syria. That was evident from what Netanyahu said about their conversation. And then Trump added, when the two of them were talking in front of the press, that he said, look, Erdogan is a very good friend of mine. We have always had a very good relationship. If you have a problem with Turkey, you come to me, which, that's almost a direct quote from him. And he said, I think if you have a problem with him, I'll be able to work it out. And they said, of course, if you're reasonable, Bibi, you have to be reasonable about what you want. And of course, this is in the context of Israel continuing to strike positions in Syria, which they claim Turkey is planning to use to build up a military presence there. Now, of course, it doesn't and we'll hear from Abubaker soon. It doesn't necessarily that none of that changes the utterly horrific conditions on the ground in Gaza. And if anything, the genocide just seems to be accelerating. Although, you would think from a kind of rational, humane perspective that, once the scandal of the assassination of the 15 medics in Rafah became international news, that there might be a slowing down of the genocide for a couple days after that, just for PR purposes. But instead, you've seen a complete ramping up of it. Abubaker is here. He had joined us earlier. His internet was not so great, so he moved to a place that has better internet. I think sounds like he has no camera here, but Brad, let's see if we can bring him in here. There we go. Looking much better.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, good morning, Abubaker from Deir al-Balah, Gaza.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's evening here, to be honest. It's afternoon.
So, Abubaker, you just published a very powerful story at Dropsite News, and you went inside of one of the epicenters of heroism, but also unspeakable suffering in Gaza. You were in the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir al-Balah, and your description of doctors fighting with absolutely no medical supplies to try to save the lives of wounded Palestinians who are being targeted in Israeli airstrikes, and doctors are having to use supplies, including menstrual pads, as gauze. You described rivers of blood, corpses piled on top of another, and I encourage people to read Abubaker's full piece. But I also want to let people know that Abubaker is doing this reporting as the Israelis have intensified their attacks against his home city of Deir al-Balah. When I speak to Abubaker at night, and we talk every night, almost always there is the sound of Apache helicopter gunships in the background, of U.S. provided warplanes swooping through the sky. And Abubaker is doing this reporting while his own family is being targeted. Abubaker, I want to express the condolences of everybody at Dropsite News. Your family has suffered an unspeakable loss in recent days. Your mother's family was targeted in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, and 12 members of your family were killed in that strike, including 6 children. 2 days before that happened, 2 other family members of yours were killed in a strike outside of the Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah. And so I want, as we do an interview with Abubaker, I want people to understand what Palestinian journalists are enduring. Imagine, and I want people to really think about this, imagine how the death of any of your family members has impacted you, whether it's your grandfather or someone else, how it's impacted your life. And then imagine that this is a weekly occurrence, sometimes a daily occurrence for Palestinians. And as Abubaker does this reporting, his colleagues who are Palestinian journalists are being systematically hunted down and killed. Israel this week admits that it tried to assassinate Hassan Eslaya, a Palestinian journalist. And in the course of trying to assassinate him, they wounded him, but they ended up killing several other people, including other journalists. And one of them, Ahmed Mansour, people I'm sure who read Dropsite saw the footage of him sitting motionless in a chair after the Israelis had bombed a tent housing journalists in Khan Yunis. And his body became engulfed in flames. And we're sad to report that he died this morning of his injuries in that strike. Israel has killed more than 200 Palestinian media workers over the last 18 months. And Abubaker is doing the world a public service by doing this reporting. So, Abubaker, first, share your thoughts about this situation, the fact that your colleagues are being hunted, targeted for assassination, that your family is enduring deaths at the hands of Israeli attacks with American weapons, and you continue to report?
Yeah, first, thank you so much for the condolences, and thanks for every one of you, to every one of you. But of course, as you said, it's not just being a reporter in Gaza. It it's not the way that you are a reporter elsewhere across the globe. You know what Gazans are going through. You know what Palestinians in every corner inside the strip, what they are going through. And now, for us in particular, when you are losing your loved ones on a very daily basis, and you want to continue to report, so why are you reporting to a very, very dead world? The world is not taking care. The world is turning a blind eye and a deaf ear to what is happening, to the atrocities the Israelis are committing on a very hourly basis, not even a daily basis. So for me, it's a dire situation. It's something that I could never really imagine in my life that it could, that I really never imagined in my life that it could happen. And I know what it means to endure this, and I know what it means to go through all of this. Just losing 12 of my family members and my relatives in just 3 days is absolutely unspeakable, something that no one can imagine. Imagine seeing your mother's shedding tears over her family, and you are seeing your cousins being hunted down by Israeli drones, and every day there is an attack, and you might be the next because you're not spared at all. This itself is terrorism. This itself is pure horror that the outside world cannot really understand. But why we are reporting is very clear. We want to tell the world that we have the right to this land. And we are here just to tell the world that Palestinians' lives do matter as any lives around the world. And we want to make sure that our rights to live freely and to live in dignity are going to be guaranteed, because over the past 18 months and since the resumption of the genocide, we're seeing unprecedented terror, we're seeing unprecedented horrific war crimes that we haven't seen before. You can see in the piece that we published, the doctors are talking about new incendiary and highly explosive weapons used in these attacks. So when you are talking about this in particular, and you're talking about this scale of injuries and the terror, while you are at home, you are in danger. While if you want to go outside to search for food or water, you are in danger. I'm not going to be. I'm not going to be anyway ashamed of this, but I just had to tell you that moments before talking to you, I was digging in the ground to find for water in the ground itself, because the desalination plants have been taken out of service by the Israelis after they cut the electricity off to those desalination plants. And we have to find a way to bring water, because even those desalination plants cannot really find enough fuel to make sure that water can be brought to the Palestinians. We're talking about more than 800,000 Palestinians in central Gaza who mainly depend on this water and these desalination plants. So how can they get water? So it's not just about, I just want to make sure that people understand you're not a reporter, you are a genocide documenter, because you are living it, you are living through it, and you're living it with your family. You're losing your loved ones. Your loved ones are being hunted and killed by the Israelis, and you are struggling and striving for a sip of water and a bite of food. Your mental health is collapsed, and your physical health is also deteriorating every single day, because Israel has imposed the blockade, a full-scale blockade in Gaza for 30 days, more than 30 days, and an entire world of 9 billion people cannot do anything to just 5 million people who are closing the two crossings and not allowing a single bottle of water. Make sure that people in Gaza are now drinking contaminated water. I've seen at the hospital, this is something quite probably we didn't mention in the story, but I've seen at the hospital many cases with pollution, with poisoning, because of this contaminated water, because of the very bad quality of food. So this is the picture that even if we want to talk about it for hours, we can't really grab or capture something really perfect or pinpoint of what it is to be a reporter in Gaza. We are lacking the internet, we're lacking the means, we're lacking food, we're lacking everything. So our life is devoid of everything. Our life is devoid of life. Literally, our life is devoid of life. So how would you want reporters in Gaza to continue their work? So the only reason why we are pushed to continue and we're pushed to do this kind of reporting is the fact that, first, this is a homeland and we are deeply rooted here and we love it and we want to give everything for it, and we want to sacrifice everything that we have, even if it means that our lives are going to be sacrificed for our homeland, because we are the indigenous people to this land. And secondly, we do appreciate, and I can say it here, I'm very proud to say it, we do appreciate the great supportive journalists like you, Ryan and Jeremy, and others around the world. The people are standing behind us. The people are trying to comprehend our pain. All this really, really means to us. And I can tell you, people are talking outside about what the support in the Western world, which is absolutely corrupt, and this very, very racist and white supremacist, which is a fact that Palestinians know. But the way that Palestinians are supported that way by those people in the West really, really uplifts our spirits and makes us continue to endure and continue to hope. And we will continue to hope. And as I told you, Jeremy, we will turn our pain to hope and continue to hope.
And let me ask you a practical question too. You said before you came on here, you were digging for water. I mean, did you find any? What is the process there? So I think it might help people to understand.
You're gonna bring a shovel. Yeah,
right,
you're gonna bring a shovel.
And then let's say you hit it. Then you're filtering back and forth. Like what's the next step?
Yeah, it's just like you having a shovel. You are digging, like you spent around probably 30 minutes digging inside, because you need to dig deep into the ground to make sure that you're getting some water, or you're probably gonna have a tube or a pump in so you can pump out the water outside to you and have this specific, very, very limited amount of water, some few liters, but you need to dig deep into the ground and see if there's water deep into the ground. But sometimes you can't really find it, so you have to dig deep. And by the way, you can't dig deep much more than that, because it's suspicion. It's very suspicious, and I'm sure you understand why, because that word which starts with T, Israel will think it other way. So I'm sure you understand it, because Israel has targeted several people who tried to dig deep into the ground before. Then they dug very, very deep into the ground, many meters inside, and they were targeted because Israel thought that they were digging the kind of thing that I was telling you about. So it's very dangerous. Imagine that we are risking our lives to get some dignity, to get some water. Imagine like how difficult it is. But yes, this is our life. This is the reality that we are literally living at the moment.
So how do you choose the spot so that you're less likely to get targeted? Because you're right. I've seen images of men who've been out just looking for grass or water or wood and get targeted, because it's not as if Israel makes a mistake that they care that there's any accountability. It's just well, done.
Absolutely, yes.
So what's your tactic to not to give anything away, but like how do you try to make sure that you don't get targeted?
There's no way to make sure that I'm not gonna be targeted, Ryan. No, I know that I might be targeted.
You can't make sure. No.
Yeah, there is no way to make sure that you're not going to be targeted. Even if I dig deep or I don't dig deep into the ground anywhere, maybe I will walk in the street and they will target me. It's very easy, because they're targeting everyone. Every place is under the heavy Israeli fire. Now the southern parts have been ordered to evacuate. Now thousands of families have fled their homes and their neighborhoods, and Israel has now devastated most of those neighborhoods and areas and the southern regions of Deir al-Balah. So people, how can they cope? You cannot really put a blame on us, because we are literally beyond the stone era. We are literally fighting for a sip of water. Like I'm sorry to say this, but it's just like we're seeing on social media every time that people in press conferences, they're having one cup of clean water in front of them. They're drinking that because they feel quite thirsty after talking a lot. But Palestinians here, they do not have this kind of luxury. It's not a luxury, to be honest, but for us it's a luxury. Right. And for others it's their very simplest human right. So this is the peak, this is the pinnacle of the humanization that is very mentally traumatizing us and very, very mentally taking a heavy toll on us that we can't really, that we can't really recover from. And let me just tell you one thing in the end, because 1 hour ago, they have targeted a free food distribution center in Khan Yunis. 2 days ago, they've done it the same way. In Khan Yunis, they've killed 12 people, including many children, who are lining up for a plate of food, a plate of rice, by the way, not the thing that food literally means. And now we are talking about around a dozen wounded and a dozen killed in just another Israeli attack on a free food distribution center. So just tell me, why are you attacking? What do you want to achieve militarily when you are attacking free food distribution centers, when you are cutting electricity off to the desalination plants, when you are attacking water trucks in the streets who are moving water to the desperate and the needy people around Gaza and in central Gaza? What are you achieving by that? This is terrorism. Again, this is terror. This is terrorism. This is horror. This is what Israel is now inflicting upon Palestinians, and we know that anyone can be the next target.
We're now, yesterday marked 18 months of this intense genocidal war, and what we've seen in particular since March 18th and the resumption of the intense military scorched earth attacks against Gaza, combined with a full spectrum blockade. People need to understand this, that since March 2nd, nothing has been allowed into Gaza at all. Nothing. And Israel then on March 18th, after it violated the ceasefire systematically, it refused to participate in negotiations for a second phase of the deal, unleashes a hellfire attack against the Palestinians of Gaza that has killed over 1,200 people, hundreds of children. The majority of people killed since March 18th, as has been true from the beginning of the genocide, have been children, women, and the elderly. But one thing that we also have seen so almost daily since March 18th is Palestinian children's bodies being shredded. I can't take any more looking at decapitated Palestinian children. That is what Israeli strikes are doing with American weapons. It is unspeakable what we are witnessing. And remember that the President of the United States, Joe Biden, stood before the world multiple times and lied about October 7th and said he had seen images of Palestinian fighters beheading babies. And that was a crucial component of the propaganda campaign to dehumanize Palestinians. They lied about beheading babies on October 7th so that they could justify beheading Palestinian babies for the past 18 months. And as Israel lays siege to Gaza again, blockades it from having any food, medicine, water, shuts down its electricity, now Israel is saying that it is permanently annexing large portions of Gaza. They have now taken over. Rafah was a huge city relative to the Gaza Strip. The Israelis have turned it into a wasteland desert of rubble that used to be the homes and businesses of Palestinians. And now Israel has cut a new corridor across Rafah and is essentially permanently going to block Gaza from having any access to the outside world that is not entirely controlled by the Israelis. It means that there is no more an actual border with Egypt. They are stealing Palestinian land. They are laying siege to Gaza. They are blockading all supplies from getting in. And at the same time, Israel continues to sabotage any sort of a resumption of the ceasefire process that was put in place and endorsed and guaranteed by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt in January. And what we are witnessing now is what Netanyahu described as his plan for the final stage, which is an attempt to remove the Palestinians of Gaza from their land. And Abubaker, as you have endured this, I want people to understand that the city you're in, Deir al-Balah, and you've written about this journalistically as well, was one of the few places in the Gaza Strip that was able to maintain some form of normalcy isn't the right word, but some functionality.
The only one.
The only one, right? And when I first started working with you, I remember you emphasizing this. You pitched a story to me on the centrality of Deir al-Balah, and you said at the time that if this city if the Israelis lay siege to it and destroy this city, that this is an indication that the entire Gaza Strip is going to be completely destroyed. And now we're seeing that. There were forced displacement orders issued in the southern parts of Deir al-Balah. You are constantly, every single night, reporting new airstrikes, new shelling, quadcopters constantly patrolling.
And they're now.
Yeah. So if people that understand that Deir al-Balah was a place that people fled to from the north of Gaza, from the south of Gaza, what are the stakes if the Israelis go full scorched earth against Deir al-Balah right now?
I hope they will not, to be honest, because it's a very, very, hazardous escalation. And this will mean literally the collapse of the entire Gaza Strip, as you said. And I can tell you what it means. Deir al-Balah is the main haven for every Palestinian in Gaza. It's the last standing city. It's where the only college, the only stadium, the only mainly and fully functional hospital are. So what does it mean to destroy or attack this city? Where people are going? You just mentioned that Israel has created another corridor, which is Mirage corridor, more to the central and western parts of Rafah, which means that people can't even set foot on any area of land inside Rafah, on any 1 square meter inside Rafah. And even Israel is right now, because reportedly over the course of the past 48 hours, Israel has been targeting people in the middle between Rafah and Khan Yunis, the division area in the middle between Rafah and Khan Yunis, which is Mawasi Rafah, which is supposedly a humanitarian safe zone as designated by the Israelis. Israeli warplanes have carried out several airstrikes over the course of the past 2 days, killing reportedly over or around 5 Palestinians. So what Israel is doing is shrinking the humanitarian safe zone, canning people and just bringing them and cramming them into a very, very tiny area inside the center and more to the seaside. And then we are going to do what Israel is thinking of, is that we are going to take the entire Gaza Strip and we're going to leave Palestinians along the seaside, along the sea, this sea area. So we're going to give them just a very tiny area of the very tiny area, which is 360 square kilometers. Before the war, before the genocide, right now Israel is taking full control of Rafah, is taking full control of the northern parts and further of those region borders like Deir al-Balah, the eastern outskirts, are also under the control of the Israelis. So what this means is that Israel wants to destroy and annihilate every means of life inside the territory. It wants to make sure that Palestinians haven't got anything left. This is the place where all the humanitarian organizations operate. This is the place where Palestinians go and exchange goods and buy goods and move them to the northern parts. And all of their lives is just right now being held here inside Deir al-Balah. Most of the cases that we are talking about, and Maryam Isa, the 7-year-old with a spinal cord injury and full body burns, as well as fractures in her legs and her limbs, she was brought from the Indonesian hospital in northern Gaza to Al-Aqsa Matas Hospital. So imagine what it would mean if Israel is going to attack and destroy Deir al-Balah. But we have to mention that in August 2024, Israel started off a military operation, ground offensive in the eastern part, and it has already destroyed and wreaked mayhem there in the eastern part. They have destroyed over areas, they have agricultural land.
Abubaker, hold on one sec. Abubaker, hold on one sec. You broke up there, and I really want people to be able to hear what you were saying. You were talking about in August 2024. Just say that again, what you were saying.
Yeah, I was just saying it's August 2024. Israel started a military ground offensive in Deir al-Balah's eastern part, and the Israeli forces have wreaked mayhem in those areas, destroying over 7 towers for hundreds of Palestinian families and annihilating many residential areas and bulldozing several landscapes. And by the way, they have also destroyed over 8 wells in those areas, which has amounted to more suffering to Palestinians in Deir al-Balah and in central Gaza in terms of obtaining clean water and non-potable water. So imagine what it means, because Deir al-Balah has been already attacked, but not the entire area. It's still the last standing city, and we have to keep it. As we mentioned in the story, Deir al-Balah is not right now the capital. I can tell you that the foreign people, the foreign delegations, they come to Deir al-Balah, the other delegations as well, that who are trying to help Palestinians. They come to Deir al-Balah, they come to Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital. The trades are being held here. The exchange of goods is here. The treatment of injuries is also here. The only stadium, the only college. I've talked to people from the Ministry of Education, and they told me they're trying to resume education. There was a plan in place that education for university students would be resumed starting with Palestine Technical College, which is quite a few meters away from me right now, which is the only standing college right now, the only standing university that hasn't been hit by Israeli strikes. So there was a plan to make sure that is going to be the stone, or the building stone to rebuild everything in Gaza, as I told you, and it's going to be the backbone of Gaza right now, because it is really the backbone of Gaza. But right now, when we're seeing the first waves of displacement, the continuous attacks on the southern regions, people are very frightened of where to go and of what to do, because again, I can reiterate that all the time. If Deir al-Balah is annihilated, there is nothing called Gaza anymore on the map.
What are you talked about people going back to college? What are the younger kids doing now who've been out of school for 18 months? Are there any informal tutoring sessions going on? Are people kind of pulling together to, or are they just kind of left to their devices for the day? Like, how are the littlest kids handling this complete break and the total destruction of education?
Yeah, it's very important to mention kids. Thank you, Ryan. So I'm going to tell you first, like, there was education, some sort of formal education during the ceasefire. Students were going to schools here in Deir al-Balah and elsewhere across Gaza. So there was some kind of, repair of the life means that Israel had been destroying over time. But right now, when Israel resumed its genocide in Gaza, all this education has stopped, has been halted, and all other forms of life, like the restaurants and people trying to go back to sports sessions, to watch football games in cafes, and all this kind of activities that were, there was uplifting the spirits of the Palestinians and trying to restore a sense of normalcy for them. All of them are right now stopped, or maybe many of them have destroyed and deliberately hit and targeted by the Israelis. So right now there is no informal schooling, there's no informal tutoring session. There are no formal tutoring sessions, unfortunately, because the children don't have anything to eat to even go to school. How would you want a young student, a kid under 12 years old, to go to school while he cannot really provide himself with one meal per day? He doesn't have time to go to school, or to informal schooling, but he rather has time to go and line up in a queue for a plate of food at the free food distribution centers. He needs to walk kilometers far away from where his displacement shelter is to get some liters of non-potable and potable water for his family. And he needs to work because children labor has been forced to children here in Gaza. And when I'm walking around in the Gaza streets, I can tell you here in Deir al-Balah that many of the makeshift stalls are run by children. And come to talk to children, why are you working? They're telling you, my entire family has been killed. I'm the only one with my little brother, so I have to work to provide a source of income for me and my family to manage to eat. I vividly remember meeting one of the children just 2 days ago inside the hospital while I was reporting on the story. And the story we just ran yesterday with Dropside News. And one of the students was bringing his school books from afar to sell them. And he has been doing that for a long time, to sell them for absolutely nothing, just $50 and sometimes less than $50 to provide something for his family. And he's just roaming around asking people to give him whatever they can really give him. But you can't really tell someone poor to give you something while he himself or they themselves cannot really provide anything. And another important point about the children here are very traumatized. I remember, like, my nephews and nieces, when they hear the war plane in the sky, they're saying, there's going to be a bombing, we must run away. And they start running away and sobbing in panic. And this is the same for the other children. I met some other children in Deir al-Balah given the incursion, the potential incursion. And some of the children told me, Abubaker, I have to tell you this. I every day, every night, I dream that the Israeli soldiers will come here, they will execute my entire family, and they will torture me and then shoot me dead. So how those children can talk about this? The children elsewhere across the globe are talking about their future, talking about what they are eating, about the normal things, how to go to the park, go to the stadiums, to the football courts, etc. But the children in Gaza right now have become very very premature. They are now just knowing one language that we are going to be bombed, we're going to be killed, are we having food today, etc, etc, etc. And one thing that I can't really forget about children, and I can't really get over it, I can't get past it at all, is the fact that most children are barefoot, the vast majority of them, and they have only one piece of clothing on their bodies. They don't have the ability to have a shower, to take a shower. They don't have the ability to have food. And I remember, like, a group of children here in one of the biggest displacement shelters in Deir al-Balah, and I was doing some reporting, and they gathered around me, and they screamed very loudly, and they were screaming, "We want to eat. We're children, just like this. Look, like, what have these children done?" Our Pine Collective.
Yeah, Abubakar, you're breaking up again for a second, but yeah, it's reminding me of how every night before one of my daughters goes to sleep, she asks me to look in her closet and look under her bed to make sure there's no monsters. And I tell her, I looked, there's no monsters, and I can tell her with certainty, there are no monsters. You can sleep safely. I'm trying to imagine what it'd be like for a parent to not be able to tell their child that there are no monsters.
Because you mentioned this, allow me just like 2 minutes to talk about this. To all families who are listening to me, and I do appreciate that, Ryan, I know Jeremy's doing the same thing, I do appreciate that. Please tell your children what Gazan children are going through. Please tell them the stories that you're seeing. Please tell them that they are having the best life, that the worst day in their lives is the biggest dream for every child inside besieged enclave. Tell them that. Tell them that others, me personally, I'm not ashamed of this again, but I dream of a plate of a fresh food. That's my ultimate dream. A cup of clean water. I don't want anything more. As someone who's I'm literally panting while talking to you. I haven't done any efforts, by the way, but I'm literally panting, and I feel much the thirst in my throat, but I can't have good, very clean water to satisfy my thirst. And that's why I want to urge every family and everyone who's watching Gaza, who's watching us, and who's reading the reports coming out from Gaza, to make sure that they are telling their families what it is like to live in Gaza, and to make sure that they are telling them the truth. They're telling them what their lives are like. You're having the best lives, guys. You're having the best lives ever. Yeah. You're having everything in your life. What does it mean that you're not having an outing today? This is absolutely nonsense. Some people here are crying for a sip. Ooh, I swear, a sip of water. They don't want anything more. Some people here are dreaming of absolutely nothing. Just give us some sort of protection, give us some clothes, and we don't need anything else. So the basic human rights, the basic necessities that any human being in the world has is not found here. Gaza, again, I want to reiterate that Gaza is devoid of life. There is nothing called life in Gaza, and the dead are the ones who have rested, and the alive, the ones who are still alive, are the dead alive. That's what I can tell you. So please tell your children, tell your schools, tell everybody around you what the Palestinians inside the beleaguered territory, which is Gaza, are going through and what they are dreaming of. Because this is not something to be ashamed of, but much more than that we are talking to humans and we know who you are, that what we are going through is beyond insanity, is beyond what anyone in the world can ever imagine, that it has reached a level. And I'm going to say it again, there's people around, outside, my family including them, they are just talking about food most of the time so they can distract themselves from the hunger. And most children are throwing food in the sand outside, and most children are watching, instead of having their best plates, they are watching food photos and food videos on their screens so they can really forget about the pain that they are living through at the moment. So please understand this pain, feel our pain. That's all we want to do. That's all I can ask you from, and it's worth
on
it.
the same
It's worth it.
On the same subject, and I mean, it's painful to hear your description. It's extremely painful, and I wanted to ask you to describe for people what it's like to look for food in Gaza right now. Another one of our reporters, Rasha Abu Jalal, recently did a story about how Palestinians are foraging for wild plants to eat, and some have been killed in the process of trying to scavenge or find wild growing food. She also told the story of a man who is a fisherman and encountered a sea turtle and expressed his sorrow at having to kill the sea turtle and use its meat for food. And they said they could get 5 or 6 kilograms of edible meat from a sea turtle. And he said he knew that it was an endangered species, but that this is the only life that they have right now. And I wanted to ask you, though, what it's like to try to find food. We occasionally see videos when there is a food distribution where you see children so desperate with metal pans or pots or bowls trying to receive food. But you also have written a lot about the produce that is available is not good. It's often rotten, and it's extremely expensive. And that's even if you can find it. But also, people don't have hard currency. Even if you have money in your bank account, you can't get money. You can't get your hand on hard currency. Describe what it's like to try to just find basic things to eat right now in Gaza, and what people have to go to find food.
I'm going to ask you a question, like all of you. If I ask you to go to a desert and bring water, what would you tell me?
Yeah, I mean,
the
question is obvious.
Yeah, what will you tell me? You're telling me that I'm insane. This is literally the same thing in Gaza. And I'm laughing about it out of pain. Wallah, I'm laughing at it out of pain. Because every single day, for my family, for example, okay, Mom, we know that we don't have food enough for the day, so we have to ration ourselves to something very, very limited. Everybody understands that. You've got a loaf of bread the whole day, and you've got a plate or something, and you have to keep you don't have to overeat at all. It's not overeating, by the way. You can't really get full at all. Just eat so you can really maintain your power and your energy. And we go to the markets. The markets are empty. They don't have anything. They have literally very sparse quantities of food. Very, very sparse that you can't really. You can see one makeshift stall the whole street or the whole area, in the whole area that has something to offer. And you come and ask them, and ask this makeshift stall, what is this paid for? Like, how can you bring this? Or what is it paid? Like, what is its cost? And he says that this needs around $10 or $15 or $30. Okay, we don't deal with dollars. We deal with shekels, of course. This is currency here. And I ask them, can I pay through bank? And he says, of course, no, you need cash. So there's a process here, which is very significant to tell. The first is that people no longer accept bank payments, which means, or bank app payments, which means that you have to get cash. This is the first. The second, if you want to get cash, you need to pay around a 50 or a 40% commission. That means if you have if you have $100 in your bank account and you want to get it out, if you find, by the way, if available to get cash money, okay, if you can get cash, if available, this is not guaranteed, by the way. So if you have $100 in your bank account and you want to get it out or to have it as cash money, as cash, you need to pay around 40%. So you will have only $60 out of $100. And this is the same process. So the overpricing, and there's another point, the overpricing. I'm going to tell you about the overpricing. Now, one egg costs around $3. 1 kilogram of eggplants costs around $12. 1 kilo of sugar costs around $10. 1 kilo of oil, 1 liter of cooking oil costs around $10. 1 kilo of meat, if available, which is absolutely not available, if available, it needs $90. 1 kilo of fish, $90, if available. And 1 kilo of tomatoes, you need around $12. 1 kilo of potatoes, you need around $50. 1 kilo of zucchini and bell pepper, you need around $15 to $17. These are the basics, right? Ryan and Jeremy, you are in the United States. If I tell you this is the list of the prices, would you really afford?
Not for long.
Enough.
And if I had to pay 40-50% to get cash out.
Yeah, you can't. Even if you work like in Tesla company, for example,
Yeah.
you can't really afford that because
Right.
you're not able to do so. But by the way, Ryan, this is in a place where you work. But here in Gaza, over 80% of the population have lost their work and their jobs since the genocide started. And before the genocide, because we need to keep talking about this, that life in Gaza before the genocide was a very, like, a less degree of hell, because now we are in hell, but it was a less degree of hell. So this was just another degree of hell, but much more merciful, probably. Mm-hmm. But right now, over 80% of the population have lost their work. They don't have jobs. They don't have a source of income. So how can you really afford this? And another important point, because we need the humanitarian organizations, the other ones, just make sure, and I'm responsible for what I'm saying. I know this is going to be a big responsibility to say. If the humanitarian organizations, if they are here or not here, they're not making any difference. But and I'm sending very big thanks to all people around the world who donate to individual fundraisers. If people in the West do not donate to people in Gaza, I can tell you that you would see thousands of deaths, hundreds of thousands of deaths in the first months of the genocide. And you would see that famine has killed over or around 1/3 of the population. If Western people and other people in the West who have dignity and who have a human conscience haven't donated to this marginalized category of the world, to the Gazans, these Gazans would have gone hungry and starved and would have died from the starvation and from the current conditions if people in the West didn't really or hadn't really donated to them. And I'm reiterating that this is the reality, and it's a grim reality. I know that, but in the end, we want to thank everyone who is sending this in. And again, humanitarian organizations are a reason why Palestinians are suffering in Gaza, because they are exploiters, they are profiteering from the situation and from everything.
You know, one point that you were, I want to back up to one point you made when you were describing roughly $90 for a kilo of meat, but it almost never it almost never is available, even if you had that money and were willing to spend it on it. But you also said fish. Something interesting I was talking about with another friend from Gaza is that, of course, Gaza is on the sea, from the river to the sea. Gaza is on the sea. Gaza has fishermen. Those fishermen, even prior to
Many have been killed.
Many have been killed for trying to just fish.
Around 500. We have a confirmed stat.
Okay, so around 500 fishermen have been killed. Even prior to October 7th, the Israelis limited the distance into the sea that fishermen were even allowed to go. So many fishermen weren't even able to engage in catching larger fish. It was a lot of small scale fish, or things that they were able to catch in shallower waters. They weren't able to go deeper out because the Israelis prevented it. And now Israel has been systematically bombarding that coastal area. As you said, killed 500 or so fishermen. So Palestinians would have an opportunity to eat fish, but they're killing the fishermen and they're bombing those who try to go and fish. Yes. And even before the genocidal operations began, Palestinian fishermen weren't even allowed to go deep enough to catch serious fish.
Just 12 miles. It's determined the space of 12 miles.
This is people. When people, there's this sense that there's no justification for October 7th, but October 7th justifies everything. Yeah, that's the mentality. But prior to October 7th, as you were indicating before, Palestinians were put on a calorie-restricted diet by Israeli policy. Palestinians were told you can't fish the waters off of your coast. Palestinians were told we're going to restrict your ability to go anywhere else on the planet Earth except the concentration camp that you're in. What you're describing, and I really want people to understand this, Abubaker, what you're describing is the naked face of the policy that has been in place for 76 years.
We didn't care about Gaza before the genocide. And a genocide was, I'm sorry to cut you off, but a genocide was needed to tell the world that Palestinians are being genocided, because they were genocided before this genocide. The first wars on Gaza, 4 times, there were many genocides. But right now is the biggest genocide of our time. The most live-streamed Holocaust. It's a Holocaust. It's more than a Holocaust. That's what I'm telling you. Imagine, for me personally, I had the chance multiple times when in 2021, and after that and prior to that, to leave Gaza on school programs, but I was denied because of the conditions and Israeli military control of the crossings. Many were denied the travel outside or to go outside for treatment, and there were many thousands of cancer patients and chronic diseases in Gaza who needed very desperate and urgent medical evacuation. They were denied by the Israelis, and they died in Gaza. One of our neighbors died 2 years ago, and many died before this genocide. Now, another reality, most students, around 80% of the students who were studying in Gaza's universities had many debts, okay? They couldn't really afford the tuition fees. They couldn't really attend the schools. They couldn't really attend universities. And their families could not really afford that either. And instead, we're seeing graduates, and even those who graduated from universities, and I can tell you, before this genocidal war on the Strip, there were doctors with a medical degree, nurses and engineers, civil engineers and architects and others who were having makeshift stalls of shoes, makeshift stalls of street food, makeshift stalls of medicines and other things in the streets, because they didn't have an opportunity, an employment opportunity in Gaza. And let me just remind you of one thing, okay? It's very important. By the way, before the genocide, rightly before it, just 1 month ago, before the genocide, there were over 20,000 Palestinian youths who evacuated from Gaza because They haven't got any sort of living inside the territory. So ask yourself this question. So they went for an immigration from their homeland because they didn't have any way to live. They were very frustrated with the way they were living. They didn't have any opportunities. They were marginalized, traumatized, and ostracized, and they were absolutely having the worst of their lives. Ask yourself this question: why thousands of people, just shortly before the genocide, 1 month, they had left Gaza to Turkey, to Greece, and risked their lives through illegal immigration to Greece and Turkey to find a way of living? Why this has happened? If Gaza were not a concentration camp, those Palestinian youths didn't want to leave.
Yep.
This is as simple as that.
Last question, Abubaker, and then we'll let you go. Yesterday, I'm not. Did you happen to catch Netanyahu's conversation with Trump and the press? There was one moment that jumped out at me as one of the more absurd things I've ever heard from Netanyahu. He said how outrageous it is that Hamas has kept people locked inside Gaza, and he said, "We don't keep people locked in there. That's not us. Hamas keeps people locked in Gaza." And you mentioned your neighbor who died 2 years ago. And I think this is the story that you've told me before, that when I mentioned to you that my wife was diagnosed with cancer, we talked about how she's lucky in the type of cancer that she has because it's treatable, but also she's lucky that she lives in a part of the world where she can travel to get that treatment. And I think, was it your neighbor who got a cancer diagnosis that may have been treatable, but just simply wasn't able to receive the treatment? Was that the same one that you were talking about? And I'm curious for your response to Netanyahu saying that it's actually Hamas that keeps people locked in.
It's nonsense. It's totally nonsense. Okay, if he kept people locked in, if he didn't keep people locked in, why did he close the crossings? This is first.
Good
why?
question.
Yeah. Why did he annihilate Rafah and the Rafah border, through which people were escaping for safety or for their freedom, although they were paying unimaginable prices for their own freedom? They were paying around $5,000 per person to get out of Gaza. So why did he close the two crossings? Why is he still denying the medical evacuation of more than 1,300 Palestinian injured Palestinian children and women right now? Why is not he allowing them outside? Why is not he allowing people who are desperate to go outside just to continue their education or to have their own treatment outside? So you look at it like, why is he continuing to shrink the humanitarian safe zone? Why is he still bombarding areas where no danger can be formed or can be posed on the Israelis? And by the way, Deir al-Balah, most of it are farmers. They are farmers. They don't have anything. They don't have time to such kind of terrorism, which he claimed. By the way, they are farmers. They go out from their homes and from their places very, very early in the morning before dawn, and they come back home at 5 or 6 p.m. our time, so before the sunset, to have their sleep and to spend time with their families. Why are you attacking Deir al-Balah? Why are you creating corridors in Rafah? Why are you turning entire places and neighborhoods into buffer zones if he is not the one liable for that? And one important point regarding the anti-Hamas protests, okay? Because it's very interesting to talk about this. By the way, I don't want to talk about this. Palestinians have the right to express whatever they want. But Netanyahu said and declared that if the people of Gaza went against Hamas, or rose up against Hamas, we would be helping them having a good life. I know families, I know people who went out in these protests and they were killed during the past 14 days. I'm talking about hundreds who went in these protests and they were murdered by Israel. And I don't want to elaborate anymore. This speaks itself.
Well, Abubaker Abed, we're so grateful to you for your journalism, and I'm sorry that almost no Western journalists have had it's not even courage, have had just the decency to raise their voices in defense of our Palestinian colleagues, as the Israeli regime openly celebrates its assassination of journalists, not to mention its killing of Palestinians from all sectors of society. And again, our deepest condolences on the unspeakable losses that your family has suffered throughout this genocide, but specifically in the past week. And we at Dropsite News stand in full solidarity with our Palestinian colleagues, and will continue every single day to make that clear. If powerful reporters won't do it from big networks, that's their business. They have to answer for that someday. But we believe in you, we support you, we love you, and we appreciate you, Abubaker.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just want to say in the end that please, it's worth everything that you go on a huge global strike. It's worth everything to sacrifice what you have, because I know that it's not going to affect you if you leave your outing for today, if you leave your own job, if you leave your own work, sacrifice it, learn from Ibtihal, learn from the others that Palestinian lives matter. Save your humanity, don't save your job. Save your own humanity, maintain it, and don't maintain your job. You're gonna have more jobs in the future, but imagine what Palestinians are going through. Please understand that, comprehend our pain, feel our pain, and know that even if you sacrifice yourself being in jail for all eternity, you will save your humanity. But if you stand by passively, shame will chase you forever. So it's worth it. We need you to mass protest. We need you to mass boycott, divest, and tackle your governments and attack the weapon manufacturers and make a change. Because if it continues like this, the severe consequences are going to be unimaginable. And thanks to every one of you, and thanks for your solidarity, Jeremy and Ryan, and to everyone watching. Thank you.
Abubaker Abed is a tremendous journalist in Deir al-Balah, Gaza. We're honored to publish his reporting at Dropsite News. I would really strongly encourage people to make sure to look at Abubaker's latest dispatch about the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir al-Balah. There's also some very powerful photographs that Abubaker took inside of the hospital. We will be back next week at this same time on this new live broadcast that we're starting, Dropsite Newsroom. We'll continue to bring you Abubaker's reporting, as well as other colleagues in Gaza, the occupied West Bank, and beyond. If you want to support our work, you can go to dropsitenews.com. You're welcome to be a free subscriber. You're going to get all of our content. But if you become a paid subscriber, you help to facilitate the kind of reporting that we were discussing today. You can go to dropsitenews.com for more information. On behalf of everyone at Dropsite News, I want to thank our readers, our subscribers, our viewers, our listeners for having our back. We will continue the reporting. Until next time, I'm Jeremy Scahill. Thank you so much.